I woke to the soft, steady beeping of machines and the whisper of rain against the glass, the kind of February rain Oregon keeps just for itself. Thin, relentless, and patient. The guest wing of our house had been stripped of personality and turned into a small clinic. Stainless steel carts, the faint sting of antiseptic, a monitor that drew my pulse in green light. Somewhere down the hall, a door clicked, hesitant, as if it were trying not to be heard. I didn't move. It's easier to learn the truth when people think you're asleep. Caleb's voice carried first, low, flat at the edges the way it gets when he's trying to hold a line. Another voice answered, a man's, the syllables careful, professional. I caught only pieces, the way words drift through a doorway and break apart. Platelets, refractory, 3 to 4 weeks at most, unless the pause stretched, unless there's a miracle. The word fell into the quiet like a coin into deep water and kept falling. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it, but this time it sounded like a verdict. I stared at the ceiling and counted my breaths, 4 in, 6 out, pretending I was the one in control. It's a game the sick play with themselves. Control the breath, control the tremor in your hands, control the way your thoughts swarm when a stranger places a time limit on your life. The room smelled faintly of rosemary from a new shampoo the night nurse had left on the windowsill. Someone's small kindness, and under it the clean, metallic scent of saline. The rain tapped harder. Footsteps came closer. I closed my eyes a second too late. The door opened. Light thinned through my lashes. Caleb stopped beside the bed and did what he always does when he thinks I'm asleep. He touched my hair like it might shatter, then my wrist, counting the beats he could already see on the monitor. His palm felt colder than the room. "Hey," he whispered to the air more than to me. "I'm here." He was always here and yet not. The company followed him like weather, emails, calls, board members who said his name with their own plans baked into it. Lately, their voices had grown sharper. Lately, everything had. He dragged the chair closer. The scrape of its feet on the wood made me want to apologize for the floor. I kept my breathing even. There was a time when I filled silence for both of us, when I came home with stories from the lab, when science felt like a clean, bright language we both spoke. Now, sentences arrived in fragments. Side effects, markers, decline, words that didn't mean anything until they did. "They're wrong," he said after a while, so quietly I almost missed it. "They have to be." The bed hummed, some subtle adjustment as the compressor shifted. The house clicked and settled the way old houses do in the rain. I wanted to tell him I didn't need a miracle. I needed a morning without the taste of metal in my mouth. I needed one ordinary walk to the kitchen without the half-flight turning into a mountain. I needed him to stop looking at me like I was a problem he couldn't solve. I wasn't sure what I needed. Maybe that was the point. Somewhere in the hallway, a phone vibrated against wood. He didn't answer. He stayed, counting, watching, as if vigilance itself could hold me in place. In the darker hours, I have learned to inventory small things because small things still belong to me. The damp curl of hair at my temple, the sting at the foresight that fades if I breathe through it, the rain's tempo shifting from quick to slow, like a metronome changing its mind. The faint citrus on Caleb's cuff because he forgot to rinse the cutting board after slicing an orange before he came up here. The way the air moves when he stands, even before he stands. The way he hesitates at the door, a man arguing with an empty room. "Tomorrow," he said finally to the window or to me or to himself. "We try something else tomorrow." He clicked the lamp off. The hall swallowed him. His footsteps, 3, then 2, then none, disappeared into the house. When the quiet returned, it felt heavier, like it knew more than it wanted to say. I opened my eyes. Out beyond the glass, the firs were black strokes against a sky the color of slate. The valley below layered in damp, silver air. Our life used to be meetings and flights and calendar blocks. 2 people who believed in data and the clean certainty of results. We planned years and numbers. We quantified hope. Now strangers came into our home and adjusted my hope with their hands. 3 to 4 weeks, the voice had said. I pressed my lips together and tasted the sweetness of the rosemary shampoo. I could almost laugh at that, my body failing its scale, and here I was cataloging a fragrance note like a line in a paper. But the brain keeps what it can. It keeps rain. It keeps the lamp's soft circle cooling on the wall. It keeps your husband's hand cold and careful around your wrist. It keeps a sentence broken in half and the part after the pause. Unless the monitor ticked on. I turned my head a fraction and watched the green line climb and fall. Climb and fall. A little more effort in each peak than yesterday. Not a miracle. A graph. I have always trusted graphs. I let my eyes close again and pictured the space behind them. The dark shape of the valley, the ridgeline, the thin path you take when you can't see the end but you walk anyway. Tomorrow, he said. The word sat where I could reach it. I held it in my mouth like a small stone and waited for sleep to find me. And if it didn't, I would count the rain and the seconds between the beeps and the breath going in and the breath coming out, because tonight I was still here. Tonight I could hear the storm and name it. Tonight the sentence had an unless, and that was enough to turn the door's soft click into a promise. By morning, the rain had thinned to a mist that clung to the glass like it couldn't quite let go. I drifted in and out of shallow dreams, the kind where your mind keeps replaying the same sound. Footsteps in a hallway, the shuffle of papers. But each time you turn the corner to see who's there, you wake instead. The nurse came and went, her movements soft and practiced, as if she'd trained herself to be invisible. She adjusted the 4-line, checked the monitor, left without asking questions I couldn't answer. I heard Caleb's voice again before I saw him. It was sharper now, stripped of the low reassurance he'd used last night. I don't care about the optics, Robert, he said somewhere near the front of the house. She's not a contract, she's my wife. That makes her my priority. The reply was muffled, a man's tone clipped with the kind of patience that's really irritation in a suit. I didn't need to hear the words to know the shape of the conversation. They'd been circling the same battlefield for weeks. The company, the board, the quiet suggestion that if I was going to die, he should at least die with his position intact. When he finally came in, he'd smoothed his voice back into something calm, but his jaw betrayed him. He tried to smile. "Morning," he said, leaning down to brush his lips against my temple. His breath carried the faint scent of black coffee. "How are you feeling?" It was the question people ask when they don't really want the answer. I told him the truth anyway, like I'm watching the tide go out. His eyes tightened for a second. "We'll change that," he said, too quickly, like a promise he'd already decided how to keep. He pulled a chair closer, sat, so our knees almost touched. "Elena, I'm going to be gone for most of the day." My chest sank a little at that. "Where?" "There's someone I need to see." He hesitated, as if debating how much to tell me. "A woman in the valley. She helps people when medicine runs out of options." My instinct rose before my logic could catch it. "A healer?" I could hear the skepticism in my own voice. We'd built our lives on evidence, on peer-reviewed studies and trials with clean control groups. Folk remedies were for stories told around wood stoves. He didn't flinch. "She's helped others. I read about her. I think she can help you." My throat tightened, not from illness, but from the weight of what it meant for him to leave the structure he trusted, to reach for something he couldn't quantify. He took my hand. "I'm not ready to let you go." The way he said it, steady, quiet, without the heroic edge people put on dramatic declarations, made it harder to breathe. I closed my eyes, picturing the long road that cut through the valley, the way the fog pooled in its dips. "Caleb!" I started, but he was already standing, already tucking the blanket closer around me, as if fortifying the walls before stepping into the storm. "Rest," he said. "I'll be back before the rain." I listened to the sound of his footsteps retreating, the low murmur of his voice at the front door, the muffled thud as it closed behind him. The house fell quiet again, except for the pulse of my own heart in my ears and the faint, persistent hiss of the mist against the glass. I turned my head toward the window and tried to picture the woman he was going to find, and whether she would look at me and see something worth saving, or just another name for the ledger of the almost gone. The mist thickened as the day slipped by, turning the view outside into a watercolor of grays and greens. I drifted in and out, lulled by the hum of the oxygen concentrator and the occasional creak of the old beams overhead. At some point, I heard the tires on the gravel drive, slow, deliberate, as if whoever was behind the wheel didn't belong here and knew it. The front door opened. Voices, Caleb's lower than usual, and another I didn't recognize, soft, but edged with something that felt like certainty. A moment later, footsteps approached, unhurried but purposeful. When the door to my room swung open, the air seemed to change with it. She stepped inside without hesitation. Tall, silver hair woven into a braid, threaded with dried flowers. Eyes the pale blue of winter sky just before snow. Her dress was the color of deep water, embroidered along the hem in patterns I didn't recognize but felt older than the room itself. She smelled faintly of cedar and something sweet I couldn't place. For a moment, I thought the air around her might actually be warmer. "Elena," she said, not a question, not a guess. My name sat in her mouth, like she'd been carrying it for years. I glanced at Caleb, but he was watching her, not me, as if trying to read her the way he reads a complex chart. "I'm Velma Ashwood," she continued, coming closer until she stood at the side of the bed. "You've been walking a thin path for a long time." Her gaze held mine, steady, unblinking. I felt the urge to look away, as if she might find something in me I hadn't yet decided to give. Her hand was cool when it touched mine, but the coolness was soothing, like the shade of a tree on a fevered afternoon. Then she placed her other hand lightly on my abdomen. The touch was gentle but deliberate, as though she were listening with her skin. Her brow softened. "There is another heartbeat here," she said quietly. "Small but strong." For a moment, the words didn't make sense, just a series of sounds strung together. Then meaning crashed over me. Another heartbeat. My mind snagged on all the things I'd been told, after the chemo, after the surgeries. Words like never and impossible. I looked to Caleb. His eyes had gone wide, his breath caught halfway between disbelief and hope. "That's not," my voice faltered. "That can't be." Velma's expression didn't change. "It is. Your body is fighting for more than just you now." She drew her hand back, resting it lightly over mine again. "But you are both in danger, and the choice ahead will not be easy." A choice. The word landed with the weight of something that might break me, even more than the illness had. Caleb stepped closer, his hand finding my shoulder. "If there's a way to save both," Velma's gaze shifted to him, "it can be tried, but it will take everything she has and everything you can give her." I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed on hers. "Then we try." My voice surprised me, steady without the tremor I felt inside. I didn't need time to think. Somewhere beneath the fear, something new had taken root, small but unyielding. If there was another life inside me, even a fragile one, I would not choose to abandon it. Velma nodded once, as if she'd expected nothing else. "Then we begin." The mist outside pressed harder against the glass, blurring the line between the valley and the sky. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was the one fading. Something in me, someone in me was pushing back, and I was ready to push with it. Night came early, folding itself over the house until the only light in my room was the low amber glow from the lamp in the corner. Velma had gone to prepare what's needed, her words, not mine. Caleb lingered at the edge of the bed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, like he was afraid if he stood, something would shift that couldn't be shifted back. Neither of us spoke for a while. The only sounds were the slow tick of the clock on the wall and the faint sigh of wind moving through the fir trees outside. I watched him the way you watch a photograph, knowing it can't look back at you. He looked older than he had even this morning. Shoulders tense, shadows deep under his eyes. I keep thinking about what she said, I murmured, my voice quiet enough that the room almost kept it for itself. He straightened. About the baby? I nodded. The words still felt too delicate to speak out loud. Caleb, we've been told over and over that it wasn't possible. I stopped letting myself think about it years ago. My fingers twisted in the blanket. And now, if she's right, if this is real, his hand found mine, warm this time, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. Then it changes everything. It changes nothing, I said quickly, surprising us both. I'm still sick. You're still fighting the board. We're still here, waiting to see which breaks first, my body or your company. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. Then we hold both together. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that holding on was enough. But in the quiet, I could still feel the unspoken, the risk Velma hadn't dressed up in hopeful language, the reality that saving one life might cost the other. Before I could say more, a soft knock came at the door. Velma stepped inside, carrying a small bundle wrapped in deep green cloth. She moved like the light around her bent to let her pass. Setting the bundle on the bedside table, she unwrapped it to reveal small pouches of dried herbs, glass jars of amber liquid, and something that looked like polished river stones. We start tonight, she said simply. Your body is tired. It needs to remember what strength feels like before it can share it. She glanced at Caleb. You'll help. He stood, no hesitation. Velma poured something dark and fragrant into a ceramic bowl, steam curling upward with the scent of earth after rain. Breathe this, she instructed, holding it near. Let it settle in you. Don't force it. Let it find its way. The first breath was strange, sharp, bitter, almost metallic. But then it softened, and a warmth spread through my chest. My eyelids felt heavier, but not in the way of exhaustion. More like sinking into a warm lake. Velma's voice came from somewhere, just above me. This is not about defeating the sickness. It's about remembering that you are more than it. Caleb's hand was at my back, steady, as if anchoring me to the bed and to him. I closed my eyes, let the warmth drift further in, and thought of the second heartbeat Velma claimed to have heard. I didn't know if it was strong or fragile, real or imagined. But I knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing myself for the next wave to pull me under. I was holding on to something, and it was holding back. By the next morning, the house felt different. I couldn't explain why. Nothing visible had changed. The same filtered light spilled through the curtains. The same faint hum of the equipment kept time with my breathing. The same scent of rosemary and antiseptic lingered in the air. But there was a stillness I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense that something was waiting. Velma came in just after sunrise, her hair loose now, silver waves falling over her shoulders. She moved to the window and opened it halfway. Cold air swept in, edged with the smell of damp earth and cedar. The room needs to breathe, she said, as though it were as alive as I was. She carried over a steaming mug and set it on the nightstand. The surface of the liquid was a deep, reddish brown, flecked with bits of leaf and bark. Sip slowly. It will taste bitter. It did. The flavor clung to my tongue like dark chocolate gone wrong. But as it slid down, it left behind a surprising warmth, not just in my throat, but in my fingers, my toes. Caleb appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, his hair damp from the shower, shirt sleeves rolled up. How is she? Velma didn't turn. Stronger than yesterday. His eyes flicked to me. You look different. I wanted to ask better or worse, but I held the words back. Instead, I said, I feel here. More here than I did yesterday. Velma glanced at me then, her eyes narrowing like she was confirming something. That's the beginning. But we have to keep the rhythm steady. No sudden movements. No shocks to the system. As if on cue, footsteps echoed in the hall. Sharp, measured, unmistakable. Eleanor. Even before she appeared, I could picture her. Spine straight, chin lifted, eyes scanning the room like a judge entering her courtroom. She swept in wearing a tailored coat, the kind you wear even indoors to make a point. Her gaze landed on me first, softening just enough to pass for concern. Then she saw Velma and froze. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Eleanor said, very slowly, "I know you." Velma didn't flinch. "We've met, though it's been many years." Eleanor took a step closer, studying her face as if searching for proof in the lines time had left. "You're the woman who came for my mother. The one everyone said was a story she made up." "I'm not a story," Velma said quietly. Eleanor's lips parted, but no words came. I watched her carefully. This was a woman who never lost her footing, yet something in her posture shifted, as though the ground beneath her had tilted. Caleb looked between them. "You've met before?" Neither answered him directly. Velma's gaze stayed on Eleanor. "Your family has called on me before, and now it calls again. 3 generations, always for the same thing. Life when it seems impossible." I felt the chill from the open window deepen, though the morning sun was rising outside. For the first time, I wondered if my place in this house, this family, was part of something bigger than choice or chance. Eleanor's eyes flicked to me, unreadable. "If you're here for her, then do what you came to do." She turned sharply and left the room, her heels striking the floor like punctuation marks. Velma closed the window halfway, muting the cold, and looked at me. "The circle tightens," she murmured. "We keep moving." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I could feel it, the tightening, the way the air seemed to coil, waiting for what came next. And for the first time in days, I wasn't afraid of what that might be. The days that followed blurred into a pattern, each one stitched together by Velma's quiet rituals and Caleb's steady presence. Mornings began with the bitter tea, afternoons with a slow walk, if you could call it that, from the bed to the armchair by the window. Velma said the change of view mattered. That light carried its own medicine. I didn't argue. The valley outside was shifting with the season. The firs stayed dark, but the maples along the slope had traded their bare branches for tight buds, hints of green that would open if the weather held. I found myself watching them, almost willing them forward. If they could turn toward spring, maybe I could, too. Sometimes Velma would work in silence, grinding herbs or warming oil, the rhythmic scrape and swirl of her hands filling the room with a scent that was both earthy and sharp. Other times, she hummed under her breath, low, unhurried melodies that seemed to pull my thoughts into calmer waters. Caleb joined in when she asked, learning how to press along the arches of my feet or trace the lines of my palms with oil that smelled faintly of citrus and pine. One afternoon, as he worked, I caught him looking at me not with worry, but with something like recognition, like he'd found the part of me that had been slipping away and was holding on to it. But outside the walls of that room, the world didn't wait. I knew it from the way Caleb's phone would vibrate on the nightstand, from the short, clipped conversations he took in the hallway. He didn't bring the details in, but I could read the lines in his face. The board was restless. The company he'd built, the one that had paid for every treatment I'd had, was becoming a battlefield. That night, when Velma left to let me rest, I asked him, "How bad is it?" He didn't pretend not to know what I meant. Bad enough that they think taking me out will fix it. And will it? His mouth tightened. "It'll make it worse. But they're not interested in worse. They're interested in control." I thought about that as the room went quiet again, about how sickness takes control first of your body, then of your choices, and how, in its own way, the company was doing the same to him. Velma returned just before midnight with a small pouch, the kind she always wore around her neck. She placed it under my pillow without explanation. "Tonight," she said, "you dream for both of you." When the light was out and Caleb's breathing had settled beside me, I closed my eyes and waited. I didn't know what I was supposed to dream, but somewhere between waking and sleep, I felt it, faint and steady, like a knock on the other side of a wall. I laid my hand over my abdomen and stayed very still, and the knock came again. I woke before dawn, the sky outside still deep and colorless. Caleb was asleep in the chair beside the bed, head tipped back, his hand resting loosely on my blanket, as if even in sleep he refused to let go. The pouch Velma had placed under my pillow was warm to the touch, though I was certain it hadn't been near any source of heat. I slipped it into my palm and held it there, curious. The faint scent of cedar and something sharper, juniper, maybe, rose from the fabric. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the heartbeat in the night, if it had been nothing more than the mind grasping at hope. But then I remembered the way it had pulsed against the quiet, unhurried and certain, like it belonged here. Velma appeared in the doorway as if she'd been waiting for me to wake. "You've felt it," she said, not a question. "Yes," I whispered. She nodded once, stepping into the room. "That's the thread we follow. The child will fight, but only if you keep your end of the cord strong." Caleb stirred then, blinking at the light creeping in around the curtains. "What's happening?" Velma didn't look at him. The beginning of the second path. She set a small clay bowl on the table, its surface painted with a pattern I didn't recognize. "Today will be harder. She will tire quickly. You stay close." "I'm not leaving," Caleb said, the edge in his voice more vow than defense. By mid-morning, the harder part became clear. Velma guided me through a slow sequence of movements. Nothing dramatic, but each one felt heavier than it should have. Rolling my shoulders, lifting my arms, turning my head. It wasn't pain that slowed me, but the sense that every gesture carried weight from somewhere else. "Don't force it," she reminded. "Let the body open at its own pace. If you tear the thread, we start again from nothing." I caught Caleb watching me, his jaw set. I knew that look. It was the one he wore when something inside him was breaking, but he refused to show it. By late afternoon, the clouds had thickened, turning the windows into mirrors. I was sitting by the fire when the crunch of tires on gravel cut through the quiet. Caleb rose quickly, glancing at Velma. She didn't move, only tilted her head as if listening to something far off. Moments later, the front door opened and Eleanor swept in, coat unbuttoned, a thin line of wind following her. But she wasn't alone. A man in a tailored suit stepped in behind her, carrying a leather briefcase polished enough to reflect the firelight. "Mitchell Hargrove," Eleanor announced, her tone clipped. "He's here to discuss the company's future." Caleb's shoulders went rigid. "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Mitchell said smoothly, his eyes sliding over to me with a glance that was polite but distant. "We all have a stake in what happens next." Velma's gaze sharpened, though she didn't speak. I could feel the air in the room change again, thicker, heavier, as if the conversation about to unfold would decide more than just the fate of a company. And for the first time, I wondered if my fight to survive and Caleb's fight to keep control were part of the same battle. Mitchell didn't sit right away. He lingered by the fire, warming his hands as though he had all the time in the world. His presence was deliberate, measured movements, voice low and smooth, the kind of man who never raised his tone because he didn't need to. People leaned in to hear him. "I'll be direct," he began, finally turning toward Caleb. "The board is unsettled. They've lost confidence. They believe your personal situation is compromising your judgment." Caleb didn't move, but the heat in his eyes said enough. "My personal situation has nothing to do with the company's stability." "That's not how they see it," Mitchell replied, his gaze flicking briefly toward me, as if I were a liability on paper rather than a person in the room. "They're looking for a transition. Quiet, clean, and quick." Eleanor, still standing near the door, said nothing, but the way she clasped her gloves together told me she was not an impartial observer. Caleb's jaw tightened, And you? Where do you stand? Mitchell gave a faint smile. I stand where the company survives. He opened the briefcase, removing a thin stack of papers. Sign this, and you retain a symbolic role. They'll handle the rest. You can devote your time to family matters. Velma moved then, slow and deliberate, placing herself between the fire and Mitchell's shadow. You bring this into my space, she asked, her voice low but cutting. This isn't your concern, Mitchell said flatly. It is, Velma countered, when the sickness you're feeding tries to take root here. Something in his expression faltered, just for a second, before the practiced calm returned. He set the papers on the mantel. Consider it. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to salvage anything. Caleb didn't answer. Mitchell took the silence as dismissal, snapping the briefcase shut and heading for the door. Eleanor followed him out, her heels clicking against the floor like a metronome marking the tension he left behind. When the door closed, Velma turned to Caleb. You can't fight for both at once. One will take the other down. His eyes met mine, the weight of the choice pressing into the space between us. I felt it too, that impossible pull to save everything, knowing something would have to be lost. Later, when Velma had gone and the house was quiet again, Caleb sat beside me, his elbows on his knees. If I let them take it, they'll use it for everything we built it to fight against. I reached for his hand, and if you don't? His gaze drifted to the fire, the flames catching in his eyes. Then we both have to make it out alive. There was no promise in his voice, no false comfort, just the truth and the faintest thread of determination, the same thread I felt in myself, tightening with every breath. That night, the wind rose hard against the house, rattling the old panes in their frames. I couldn't sleep. Caleb was in the chair again, his head bowed over his clasped hands, the fire reduced to a faint glow. The papers Mitchell had left were still on the mantel, untouched. Velma came in just before midnight, a wool shawl draped over her shoulders. She didn't speak at first, only poured a dark liquid into a small cup and handed it to me. Tonight, you need to go deeper, she said. There are things inside you still holding back. I drank, the taste sharp enough to make my eyes water. Heat rolled through my chest, then spread outward, until I felt as though I could hear my own heartbeat in my fingertips. Velma pulled a chair closer to the bed. Tell me, she said softly, what is it you're afraid to see? The question hit harder than the drink. Images flickered through my mind, sterile hospital rooms, the sound of monitors flatlining, Caleb's voice over the phone telling me don't give up, and the endless, grinding days when giving up had seemed like the only honest option. I'm afraid, I said slowly, that even if I survive this, I won't be the same, that the woman he married is already gone. Velma didn't look away. Then you stop trying to be her. You become someone else, someone who doesn't need to be carried. Her words settled into me, heavy but warm. I realized I'd been clinging to the idea of going back, when maybe the way forward meant becoming something unrecognizable to the woman who had first walked into this house. The fire popped, a log shifting. Caleb lifted his head. You're not gone, he said quietly. You're here. That's all that matters. I wanted to believe him, but outside, the wind roared harder, as if reminding me that being here was only part of the fight. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the valley scrubbed clean. The light through the windows was sharp and cold, revealing every detail, the fine lines around Caleb's eyes, the faint trace of green returning to the hillside, the single set of tire tracks winding away from the house. Velma came in carrying a basket of dried herbs. Today, she said, we take you out. Caleb frowned. Out where? To the water, Velma answered. It's time she remembers what strength feels like when it's moving. I didn't know if I was ready, but something in the way she said it made me swing my legs over the side of the bed, my feet finding the floor as if they'd been waiting for this moment. The air outside hit me like a living thing, cold, damp, threaded with the scent of moss and river stone. Caleb kept a steady arm at my back as we followed Velma down the narrow path behind the house. The earth soft underfoot from the night storm. Every step was deliberate, my body remembering movement in pieces, like a song I'd once known but had to hum slowly to recall. The sound of the river reached us before we saw it, low and constant, like a voice that had been speaking long before we arrived. When we stepped out of the trees, the water stretched wide and fast, its surface flashing in the pale morning light. Velma stopped at the edge, laying her basket on a flat rock. She pulled out a length of fabric, deep green, frayed at the ends, and dipped it into the current. "The river holds strength because it never stops moving," she said. "We borrow some today." Caleb's grip on my arm tightened as Velma motioned for me to step closer. The riverbank was slick, the rocks cold beneath my shoes. Velma wrapped the wet fabric around my wrists, the chill biting instantly into my skin. "Breathe," she instructed. "Let the cold tell your blood to wake." I closed my eyes. The shock of the water faded into something else, an ache, then a thrum, and finally a strange steadiness. I could feel the beat of my heart pushing against the fabric, matching the pull of the river. When I opened my eyes again, Caleb was watching me with an expression I hadn't seen in weeks. Not fear, not worry, but something like recognition. As if he saw the woman who used to walk with him along this same bank in summers past. Velma unwound the cloth, wringing it out over the current before tucking it back into her basket. "That's enough for today. Too much, and you'll take more than you can hold." On the way back, the air felt different in my lungs, fuller, easier. My steps were still slow, but they were mine. When the house came into view, a black sedan was parked in the drive. Eleanor stood beside it, speaking to a man I didn't recognize. His suit was too fine for the mud beneath his shoes, his expression too polite to be genuine. Caleb's pace slowed. "That's not board business," he muttered. Velma's eyes narrowed as we drew closer. "No," she said quietly. "That's something older than the board." I didn't understand what she meant, but as the man's gaze shifted to me, I felt it, that same tightening in the air like the moment before a storm breaks. The man stepped forward before we reached the porch, extending a hand that neither Caleb nor I moved to take. His smile was measured, the kind that revealed nothing. "Mrs. Moore," he said, his tone smooth as polished stone. "I'm Samuel Greer. I represent certain interests connected to your late father's estate." The words landed strangely. "My father's estate has been settled for years," I replied, glancing at Caleb. "That's what you were told," Greer said, eyes steady on mine. "But there are assets, substantial ones, that never went through probate. Assets certain people are now trying very hard to make disappear." Caleb's stance shifted, just slightly, but I felt it in the air between us. "Why come here?" he asked. Greer's gaze flicked toward Eleanor, who was standing stiffly beside the sedan. "Because others might prefer your wife doesn't hear the truth while she's still in a position to claim it." Velma's voice cut in from behind us, low and sharp. "You bring shadows into this house and think they won't stain the floor." Greer didn't flinch. "I'm offering her a chance to protect what's hers, but it won't be hers for long." Something in my chest tightened, not just from his words, but from the way Eleanor avoided my eyes. Memories I'd buried, half-heard arguments, letters my mother never let me read, pressed against the edges of my mind. Caleb stepped between us. "You'll leave your contact information. We'll be in touch." Greer reached into his coat, producing a slim envelope. He placed it on the porch railing, then inclined his head. "Don't wait too long. Some things vanish quietly without a trace." He turned, sliding into the sedan without another word. The car's tires hissed over the wet gravel, carrying him away until the sound faded into the hum of the river. Inside, Caleb closed the door and locked it, though no one said they felt safer. Velma studied Eleanor for a long moment before speaking. You knew this was coming. Eleanor's mouth pressed into a thin line. I knew pieces of it, enough to understand that if she digs, she'll find things better left buried. Her eyes met mine, cool and deliberate, and you may not like what you find. But the thing about surviving something that should have broken you is that fear changes shape. It doesn't vanish, it sharpens. And in that moment, I knew I'd rather face whatever was hidden than let someone else decide what parts of my life I was allowed to keep. That night, sleep came in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the envelope on the railing. Greer's calm warning looping in my head. By dawn, I'd stopped trying to rest. Caleb was already up, pacing near the window. The sky outside washed pale with early light. I think you should call him, I said. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. You don't even know what's in that envelope. I know enough, I answered, and I'm tired of everyone else deciding what I should be told. Velma appeared in the doorway, a steaming mug in her hands. She's right, she said simply. A closed door is still a door. Caleb hesitated, then reached for the envelope on the table. Inside was a single card. Greer's name, a phone number, and nothing else. The simplicity made it feel heavier, as if the rest of the story was too dangerous to put in writing. By noon, we were in his car, the valley stretching wide around us as we followed the winding road into town. Greer had agreed to meet in a small cafe near the courthouse. He was already there when we arrived, seated at a corner table, a leather folder resting beside his coffee. You came, he said, as if there'd never been any doubt. Tell us everything, I said, sitting opposite him. He opened the folder, sliding a stack of yellowed documents toward me. Your father's family owned land, hundreds of acres, in the hills outside Corvallis. Timber rights, mineral rights, water rights. Most of it was quietly transferred after his death, through shell companies tied to people your mother trusted. My stomach turned. And Eleanor? Greer's mouth tightened. Some of those companies connect back to the Moors. Not directly to her, but close enough. Caleb's jaw set like stone. If this is true, we can fight it. Greer nodded. You can, but the fight will draw everyone into the light. Friends, family, enemies. Once it starts, there's no stepping back. I looked at the papers, at the neat signatures and shifting corporate names, each one a small theft. Somewhere deep inside, a pulse of resolve took shape. I've already lost too much, I said quietly. I'm not losing what's left just because they think I won't fight. Greer slid the folder fully across the table. Then you'll need more than me. You'll need someone who knows how they move, someone they can't see coming. His eyes flicked toward Caleb. Do you have anyone like that? Caleb didn't answer right away, but I could see the name forming in his mind, and from the way his expression shifted, I knew it was someone who could change everything. Caleb waited until we were back in the car before speaking the name out loud. Daniel Walker. I frowned. Who is he? A man who doesn't owe the Moors a damn thing, Caleb said, eyes fixed on the road. He used to work in acquisitions, saw how people like them hide assets, how they bury trails so deep the law can't touch them. But he walked away years ago. Moved out near the coast, keeps to himself. Velma, who had insisted on coming with us, spoke from the back seat. And why would he help you now? Caleb glanced at me in the rear-view mirror. Because once, a long time ago, I kept him from losing everything. He told me if I ever needed to call in that favor, I'd know when the time came. We drove for hours, the landscape changing from the quiet folds of the valley to the salt-stained edges of the Pacific. The air grew sharper, carrying the tang of the ocean long before we saw the water. Daniel's place was set back from the road, a weathered cabin facing the cliffs. He was on the porch when we pulled up, a tall man with wind-burned skin and eyes that seemed to measure everything in silence before deciding whether it mattered. Caleb, he said, voice rough as gravel, didn't think I'd see you again. You remember what you told me, Caleb replied. That day in Portland. Daniel's gaze shifted to me, then to Velma, then back to Caleb. Looks like you've stepped into something big. Caleb didn't sugarcoat it. He told him about Greer, the land, the companies, Eleanor's shadow in the background. Daniel listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When Caleb finished, Daniel leaned against the porch rail. You're talking about a fight that won't end in court. People like that, they don't just give up. They close ranks. They erase you. I'm aware, Caleb said. Daniel's eyes settled on me. And you? You're ready for that. I held his stare. I've already been erased once. This time, I decide what gets written back. For a moment, the wind was the only sound. Then Daniel nodded slowly. All right, but if we do this, you'll have to walk through some ugly truths. About them, and maybe about your own family. The chill in the air deepened, but inside I felt something burn steady. A quiet, defiant heat. Because whatever those truths were, I was done being the last to know. Daniel didn't waste time. Inside his cabin, maps were spread across a long work table, their edges weighted down with smooth stones. Some showed the coastline, others the deep green sprawl of Oregon's interior, marked with neat red circles. These, he said, tapping the circles, are parcels that used to belong to your father's family. Most were sold under questionable circumstances, transferred through holding companies registered out of state. Follow the money far enough, and you'll find the same 5 or 6 names popping up. Caleb leaned over the table, and the Moores are connected. Daniel's mouth curved without humor. Indirectly, they're careful. The trick is catching the moment they move something, because in that moment they're vulnerable. I traced a finger over one of the circles. So how do we catch them? Daniel's eyes met mine. We make them think they've already won, that you're walking away. People who think they've secured their victory get sloppy. Velma crossed her arms. You're talking about baiting them. Exactly, Daniel said. You disappear for a while. Let them believe you're broken, ready to settle for whatever they offer. In the meantime, I dig. And when I find the leverage we need, you come back swinging. Caleb looked at me, waiting for my reaction. I thought about Greer's warning, about Eleanor's cool gaze on the porch. They already believed I wouldn't fight. Maybe the most dangerous thing I could do was let them believe it a little longer. I can do that, I said finally. But when we come back, we don't stop halfway. Daniel nodded once, the decision sealed. Then we start now. You'll need to leave tonight. Go somewhere they can't track you. No calls, no emails, no paper trail. I'll reach out when I'm ready. The gravity of it settled over me, but it didn't feel like fear. It felt like stepping into the river that morning. Cold, shocking, and then steady. As the sun dipped low, we stood on the cliff behind Daniel's cabin, the Pacific stretching out in a restless expanse. Caleb's hand found mine, warm against the bite of the wind. They won't see you coming, he said quietly, and for the first time in a long while I believed him. The first words I heard when I stepped through the front door of my parents' house weren't hello or welcome. They were my sister's voice, drifting over the laughter and clinking glasses like a perfectly timed dagger. She's probably late because she couldn't afford the gas. I froze, hands still on the doorknob, the warmth of the California sun disappearing behind me like a lie I'd told myself. One where family still meant something. I took a breath, smoothed the skirt of my navy blue wrap dress, and stepped inside. Jordan, sweetheart, you made it! My mom, Marianne, floated toward me, wrapped in chiffon and tension, her eyes darting nervously to the guests. Sloane's been asking about you. Of course she had. Traffic on Highway 1 was a nightmare, I said, kissing my mother's cheek. Sorry I'm late. When isn't she late? Sloane's voice rang out again, louder this time. She was standing by the granite-topped bar, champagne flute in hand, all white silk and designer heels, as if she were hosting a gala and not a family reunion. I smiled and waved at the cousins who avoided my gaze, then made my way toward the drinks table. "You look practical," Sloane said as she approached, her eyes scanning my dress like it offended her aesthetic. "Still working at that hospital." "Still saving lives," I replied evenly, reaching for a glass of sparkling water. "Oh, that's sweet," she said, voice syrupy. "Bryce and I just closed on our 5th investment property. You should think about your future, Jordan. Stability isn't sexy, you know." Before I could reply, our father, Richard, clapped his hands. "All right, everyone, let's gather in the sunroom. Sloane has an announcement." I sighed quietly, following the family into the expansive room bathed in golden light. My cousin Noah gave me a sympathetic shrug as he passed. He knew what was coming. We all did. Sloane always had announcements. She stood in front of the fireplace, glass raised. "Bryce and I have found our dream home," she said. "A stunning vacation property in Carmel Highlands. 6 bedrooms, infinity pool, panoramic ocean views. It's everything we've ever wanted." She looked right at me. Of course, not everyone is in a place to invest in something like that. "Jordan, didn't you mention something about medical debt last month?" The room went silent. I blinked. "I never said that." "Oh, I just assumed," she said innocently. "I mean, I saw those collection letters in your mailbox. No shame in it, really. We can't all be successful." Heat rushed to my face. My father avoided my eyes. My mother's smile faltered. I opened my mouth to speak, but then I closed it again. Something inside me shifted. Not rage, not pain, just clarity. I smiled, took a sip of my water, and said nothing. My silence wasn't weakness. It was precision. It was restraint. It was the final click of a long-laid trap falling into place. "Jordan," my mother whispered, searching my face. "Are you all right?" I nodded slowly. Sloane's right. Not everyone is meant for bigger things. I looked at her, dead in the eyes. Some of us are meant for smarter ones. Her smile twitched. "What does that mean?" "Oh, nothing," I said, my phone buzzing in my purse. "Just a reminder." I stepped onto the back deck and pulled it out. A message from Miranda Chin, my real estate agent. All papers signed. "Congratulations, Jordan. The Carmel house is officially yours." I glanced through the French doors into the sunroom where Sloane was still holding court, basking in her spotlight, smug and radiant. She had no idea. No clue that while she'd been posting filtered photos of beach views and dream house manifesting quotes, I'd been quietly watching, calculating, preparing. No idea that the house she was gushing about was no longer hers to dream about. I typed back, "Don't notify the seller she lost it just yet. Let's keep the new buyer private until I say otherwise." Another message came in. This one from Noah. She's on Instagram again. Manifesting the Hamptons life. "You seeing this?" I clicked the link. There she was, posed in front of the iron gates of the house, captioned, "Manifest it. Believe it. Own it." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. I slipped my phone back into my purse and leaned on the railing, letting the ocean air wash over me. The sound of clinking glasses and shallow laughter floated through the open windows. But I didn't go back inside. I didn't need to. Not yet. There would be time for confrontation later. Right now, I savored the silence, the prelude, the calm before the storm, because storms are only satisfying if the air goes still first. Sometimes, revenge doesn't need a fight. Sometimes it just needs the right address. "You're actually insane," Elliot said, setting down his coffee with a laugh that turned a few heads in the hospital cafeteria. Like, certifiably textbook level insane, and I love it. I grinned as I slid my phone across the table toward him. 6 bedrooms, private beach, infinity pool. The exact house Sloane's been flaunting for months on social media. And now, it's mine. Elliot leaned in, swiping through the photos. "Wait, this is the house? The Carmel Highlands one." "The very one," I said, sipping my tea. She doesn't know. The agent's keeping it under wraps at my request. He shook his head. You bought your sister's dream house out from under her, while she was bragging about affording it. She never made an offer, I said calmly. She just assumed no one else could. I pulled up another file on my phone, the investment portfolio that had taken me 7 years to build. Every night shift, every holiday worked, every time Sloan made fun of my hospital scrubs or my discount sneakers. All of it went straight into long-term assets. I'd stayed quiet, let her talk, let her shine, let her mock me at every family dinner. You remember Christmas 4 years ago? I asked. She told the whole table nursing was a backup career for people who couldn't handle med school. Elliot winced. Yeah, I almost threw a fork at her. That night, I opened a Roth IRA, I said. Then I started researching dividend stocks, real estate syndicates, alternative markets, and I kept doing it every time she humiliated me. My phone buzzed. A message from Noah. She's posting again, another manifestation post. This one says keys coming soon. Elliot laughed, nearly choking. She really thinks it's a done deal. Of course she does, I said. That's the thing about Sloan. She never double-checks the path. She just assumes she owns it because she looked good walking on it. Elliot took a long sip of his coffee and shook his head. You've been planning this for years, haven't you? Not at first, I said. At first, I just wanted a way out. A better future. But every time she tried to make me feel small, it lit something up in me. Something sharper. He leaned back. What are you going to do when she finds out? I'm going to let her announce it first, I said. Let her gather everyone. Make it a spectacle. Then, I'll correct the record. Elliot stared at me for a long beat. You're terrifying, he finally said. And I'm so proud of you. I smiled, but my hands were a little shaky as I tucked my phone back into my coat pocket. The adrenaline hadn't stopped since I'd signed the final documents. I was still waiting for the moment it would all feel real. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of trauma cases, surgical assists, and endless paperwork. When I finally arrived at Elliot's apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, still in my scrubs. He handed me a glass of wine. Look what came in the mail. I took the envelope and opened it slowly. Inside was a letterhead from Pacific Haven Developments, the resort group buying up coastal properties in Carmel Highlands. They want the house. Not just want, he said. They're offering you triple what you paid. I stared at the number. It was enough to pay off every debt, invest even more, and still live comfortably. But I didn't smile. I'm not selling. You sure? Elliot asked gently. This is a life-changing offer. I didn't buy that house for money, I said. I bought it to take something back. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the distant waves under the moonlight. Do you know what my dad said when I graduated top of my class? What? Elliot asked. He said, that's nice, but Sloan just made junior partner at her firm. I laughed bitterly. I remember standing there, holding my diploma, thinking, even this isn't enough. Elliot joined me at the window. You've always been enough, he said. They were just too blind to see it. Another message popped up on my phone. Family dinner at Sloan's this weekend. She says, she has big news. You're coming, right? I replied, wouldn't miss it. Elliot grinned. Please tell me you're going to drop the bomb in person. No bombs, I said. Just clarity, precision, like a scalpel, not a grenade. I opened my banking app and showed him the totals. Elliot let out a low whistle. No one ever asked how you could afford to live alone on a nurse's salary, did they? Nope. They just assumed I was struggling. Because that's the story Sloan told them. You know what the best part is. I added, everything I know about real estate, I learned from her. Elliot raised his glass. To poetic justice. I clinked mine against his, but inside, something deeper stirred. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about legacy, about rewriting what family success looked like, about showing them that quiet doesn't mean weak, and humble doesn't mean forgettable. The truth was, I'd never wanted the spotlight. I just didn't want to be left in the dark. The sky over Monterey was painted in streaks of apricot and lavender as I pulled into Sloane's driveway that Saturday evening. Her McMansion was glowing, every window lit, every outdoor lantern on, as if she were trying to illuminate her own importance. I stepped out of my car just as Noah arrived, climbing out of his truck in rolled sleeves and a tie that was already half undone. "Perfect timing," he said, falling into step beside me. "You ready for whatever this is?" "More ready than she is," I muttered, hand clutching my purse, inside of which was a manila envelope I hadn't let out of my sight for 2 days. Inside, everything was pristine, all chrome and marble and careful staging. Family portraits lined the hallway, all featuring Sloane at center stage. No one ever framed silence, so of course I was nowhere in sight. "Jordan." Bryce greeted me at the door, offering a polite smile. "Sloane's in the kitchen, been at it all day." "She cooks now," Noah whispered behind me. "She orders in and pretends," I whispered back. "Watch the trash can, always a giveaway." Sure enough, I glimpsed upscale takeout containers hastily shoved beneath the sink and the smell of garlic and lemon that didn't match the visible dishes. Sloane turned as I entered, her smile tight, eyes sharp. "Oh, good. You came." "Wouldn't miss it," I said lightly, accepting a glass of white wine from Bryce. "You're just in time," she said, straightening a platter of lobster puffs from the bistro 2 blocks away. "I was telling Mom about our amazing news. It's life-changing." "Sounds like you've been doing a lot of changing lately," I said. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "Unlike some people, I believe in advancement." My mother gave me an apologetic glance, but said nothing. The room hummed with polite tension. The doorbell rang again. My father had arrived, along with Elliot, who I'd invited as my quiet anchor. Sloane blinked at his presence. "Still hanging around hospital people?" she asked. "Still pretending you cook?" I replied, nodding toward the takeout trash. Her expression flickered, but before she could respond, Bryce called everyone into the dining room. "Before we eat," Sloane began, standing at the head of the table, "I have amazing news to share." She gripped Bryce's hand dramatically. "As you all know, we've been exploring a new property, one that really captures the next stage of our success." She paused for effect. I could see my parents' eyes shining, waiting for their golden child's next triumph. "After exclusive negotiations and a lot of hard work, we're absolutely thrilled to announce, honey." Bryce interrupted, glancing at his phone. "I just got an email from our agent." "Not now," she hissed under her breath, then raised her voice again. "As I was saying, Sloane," Bryce said louder, "the house sold. To someone else." The room went still. "What?" Sloane's voice cracked like ice. "That's impossible. Check again." "It sold 2 days ago. Agent says the new owners asked to remain anonymous." I took a long sip of wine, watching her face. The exact moment it began to crumble, it was almost art. "No," she said, shaking her head. "We had an agreement. They were holding it for us. We told everyone." My father tried to salvage the moment. "There'll be other properties, sweetheart." "No," she said louder this time. "That was our house. My house. I told everyone." "I already." She stopped mid-sentence and turned to me. "Why aren't you more upset?" I tilted my head. "Why would I be?" "Because," she sputtered, "because you're supposed to be happy for me. Jealous, even." Noah nearly choked on his drink. Bryce leaned forward, cautiously. "Maybe we should all take a minute." "No." Sloane snapped. "This was supposed to be perfect. I was going to show everyone." "Show everyone what?" I asked, voice soft. "That you win again. That you're better than me." She caught herself, but it was too late. My parents exchanged an uncomfortable glance. You know what's interesting? I said, setting my glass down. Success isn't always about who shouts the loudest. What is that supposed to mean? It means I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. Sometimes the quiet ones surprise you. Sloane's face twisted in confusion as she picked up the phone. Her eyes scanned the photos, interior shots of her dream home, aerial views of the backyard and pool. And then the name on the deed. This is a joke, she whispered. The closing papers arrived yesterday, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out the envelope. Would you like to see them? The room erupted. My father was asking questions. My mother had her hands over her mouth. Bryce looked like someone had slapped him with a wet contract. But all I saw was her face, the disbelief, the unraveling. How she finally croaked. You're a nurse. You take the bus. A nurse who knows how to invest, I replied. Every time you mocked my job, I picked up another shift. Every time you bragged about your bonuses, I quietly met with a financial advisor. But your apartment is in one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in Monterey, tripled in value. And I take the bus because parking at the hospital costs a fortune. Elliot cleared his throat. She's also one of the top earners in her department, published in journals. She's a beast. Enough, Sloane barked, spinning toward Bryce. Call our lawyer. There must be a way to contest this. Bryce shifted uncomfortably. We never made an offer, Sloane. We have no legal grounds. Then make some, she shouted. This is my house. No, I said, voice like stone. It's mine. And the real reason you're angry is because you never thought I could be competition. Silence fell again. My father stared at his untouched plate. My mother was close to tears. Competition. Sloane scoffed, but it sounded hollow now. This isn't about that. Isn't it? I stood slowly. Let's talk about dreams. Like my nursing ceremony, where you showed up late, talked through my speech, and hijacked dinner to announce your new license. Or when I got promoted and you told everyone I was playing doctor. Or last month, when you told the entire family I was drowning in debt. That was different. I was trying to help. By lying. Elliot cut in. By spreading rumors. Stay out of this. Sloane snapped. He is family, I said. He supported me more than you ever did. Bryce suddenly stood. Sloane, we need to talk. Now. About what? She asked, blinking. About the credit cards. The loan applications I found with my forged signature. Her face went pale. Not now, yes. Now. He turned to the room. I'm sorry. We need a minute. They disappeared into the kitchen, but the shouting echoed through the walls. My mother turned toward the table, trying to smile. Shall we serve the food? Actually, I said, collecting my purse and the envelope. I should go. I have contractors meeting me at my house tomorrow to discuss renovations. My father's voice stopped me as I reached the door. Jordan, wait. I paused. I'm sorry. We should have paid more attention to your achievements, to the fact I was building something while Sloane was just talking about it. He nodded, quietly, brokenly, from the kitchen. Sloane's voice rose again. I was going to pay it back. You don't understand. $60,000, Sloane. Bryce shouted. When were you going to tell me? Noah whistled low under his breath. Elliot stood and picked up his coat. That's our cue. We stepped into the cool evening air, the noise from inside still echoing. That, Noah said, catching up beside me, was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. It's not over, I replied, unlocking my car. This was just the beginning. 3 days later, I met Bryce at a small cafe across from the hospital. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked, his suit wrinkled, and the bags under his eyes spoke louder than his voice ever could. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "I know things are messy right now." I said nothing, just waited. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. "You need to see these before you make any final decisions about the house." Inside were copies of credit card statements, personal loan applications, and bank overdrafts, pages and pages, all with Sloane's name and Bryce's forged signature. "She's drowning," he said quietly. "Designer clothes, leased cars, the whole image, it's all built on debt. She was counting on that house to bail her out." "How?" I asked, though I already knew. "She planned to use it as collateral," he confirmed. "A quick appraisal, a private lender. Fast cash to pay off everything before it exploded." I closed the folder slowly. "And she never told you?" I didn't even know until I found the second credit card under my name. I confronted her 2 nights ago. She cried, denied everything, then finally admitted it when I showed her the statements. He rubbed his face with both hands. "And now, she's pulling your parents into it." My stomach turned. "What do you mean?" "They're talking about taking out a second mortgage on their home to give her a fresh start." I stared at him. "They're going to risk their retirement to cover for her lies?" He nodded grimly. "They think she's finally hit rock bottom, that this is her wake-up call." My phone buzzed. A message from Noah. "Family emergency meeting at your parents' house." Sloane's idea. "You coming?" I showed the text to Bryce. "She doesn't know I'm here," he said. "But Jordan, be careful. She's desperate now. That's when people do the ugliest things." I nodded, slipped the folder into my bag, and stood. "Thanks for the warning." He touched my arm as I turned to leave. "Just don't let her make you the villain in her tragedy." I paused. She already did. I just stopped playing the part. That evening, I pulled up to my childhood home, the porch lights glowing like they used to when I came home from college. Only now, the warmth was manufactured, the welcome carefully staged. Inside, the entire family was gathered in the living room, just like old times, except no one was smiling. Sloane sat on the couch, dressed modestly in soft gray, her hair pulled back, her eyes puffy. My mother rushed over the moment I walked in. "Thank God you came." "What is this?" I asked calmly, scanning the room. "It's about family," my father said. "About making things right." Sloane stood slowly, her hands folded in front of her like a child waiting to confess. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, "about mistakes, consequences, and I realized I've hurt people. Especially you, Jordan." Noah, seated in the corner, caught my eye and gave the slightest shake of his head. I knew what he was thinking. It was a show, a setup, and I wasn't playing along. "I've been terrible to you," Sloane continued. "Cruel, competitive, dismissive, and now I'm paying for it. But it's not just me suffering. Mom and Dad, they're being dragged into it, and I don't want that." She turned to our parents. "I'm so sorry. I want to fix this, starting with my sister." I didn't say anything. I let the silence settle, let her squirm. "I know I don't deserve it," she added, "but I'm asking for forgiveness." I waited a beat. "Are you done?" Her face faltered. "I good, because now it's my turn." I turned to our parents. "Did she tell you about the forged loan applications?" My mother blanched. "What? The maxed out credit cards? The plan to use the Carmel house to secure a private loan?" "Jordan, please," Sloane said, her voice trembling. "This isn't the place, isn't it?" I turned back to our father. "You were going to mortgage your house. For her. But when I was working double shifts to stay afloat, nothing. Not even a cosign." "That's different," my mother said weakly. "Why?" I asked. "Because I didn't cry loud enough? Because I didn't fake fragility?" My father tried to interject, but I raised a hand. "No, you need to hear this. You've enabled her for years. And now she expects me to bail her out, too." Sloane stepped forward. eyes suddenly flaring. If you sell the beach house to the developers, I could. There it is, I said, laughing bitterly. The truth. My voice sharpened. This isn't about remorse. It's about leverage. You want the house. It could save all of us, she said. Pay off my debt. Help Mom and Dad keep their home. Your debt, I snapped. Not ours. And definitely not mine. I grabbed my purse. And that house, it's not for sale. Not to the developers. And definitely not to clean up your mess. Jordan, wait, my father called as I reached the door. I turned back slowly. You know what the difference is between me and Sloane? I asked. I learned from my mistakes. She just expects everyone else to fix hers. Then I walked out, the sound of her frantic protests muffled by the soft click of the front door behind me. In the car, I pulled out my phone and dialed Miranda. She answered on the second ring. Jordan. About that resort offer, I said. Let's talk. 2 weeks later, the sun dipped low over the horizon as the last car pulled into the gravel driveway of my beach house. Through the newly installed floor-to-ceiling windows, the sea shimmered like a sheet of glass, quiet and endless. They're here, Elliot said, adjusting the appetizer trays. Everyone, Noah confirmed, handing me a glass of champagne. Ready. I looked out toward the ocean, then back to the folder resting on my desk. Time to end this. One by one, my family stepped through the door, expressions mixed. Curiosity, anxiety, denial. My mother looked around with a practiced smile. Jordan, it's beautiful. The renovations turned out better than I expected, I said. Feels like a fresh start. Sloane entered last. She wasn't wearing designer anything, just a pale cardigan and jeans. Her hair was tied back, her eyes swollen from either crying or trying not to. Bryce hovered near the doorway, not quite beside her, not quite away. According to Noah, they still weren't living together. Well, my father said, clearing his throat. This is quite something. It is, I replied. But before we celebrate, there's something we need to discuss. Every head turned. I walked over to the desk, picked up the folder, and held it in both hands. This house has changed everything, not just for me, but for what this family could be. I began handing out copies, so I created a trust. A what? My mother asked. A family trust, I explained. The house will be its main asset. Ownership is being transferred, not to an individual, but to the Ellis Family Trust. Sloane's eyes snapped up. You're giving it away? Not exactly, I said. I'm reassigning control. With conditions. Bryce scanned the document quickly. Rotating usage schedule. Financial eligibility required. Usage is conditional. I continued. Any family member may stay here, but only if they can prove financial stability. No delinquent debt, no hidden liabilities, no legal baggage. Sloane's hand trembled slightly as she held the papers. That's not fair. It's more than fair, I said. It's accountability. There's also a scholarship clause, I added, for future generations of Ellis kids, specifically for nursing and medical education. The room was silent, the sound of waves outside filling the stillness. Why? Sloane finally asked, voice small. Because we're family, I said, and families should lift each other up, not use each other as stepping stones. Bryce looked up from his document. These counseling services, you're offering financial rehab. Yes, I said, paid by the trust, available to anyone who wants to get their finances in order. He looked directly at Sloane. That's your condition, isn't it? It's everyone's condition, I said. Equal access, equal expectations. But yes, if she completes the program, she gets access like anyone else. And our mortgage? My mother asked, voice shaking. That's still yours. But the trust has emergency provisions, with strict oversight and repayment schedules. We help. We don't enable. My father stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out in silence. I didn't rush him. Eventually, he turned around, his voice hoarse. All these years, I thought I knew who you were. He shook his head. I was wrong. We both were, my mother added, her eyes brimming. Jordan, It's okay, I said quietly. You don't have to say it. Sloane was still staring at the paper, frozen. I don't deserve this. No, I agreed. You don't. But that's not the point. The point is what you choose to do next. She blinked. When does the program start? Monday, if you want it. She nodded once, a silent agreement hanging between us like a fragile thread. I pulled out one last document. Bryce, I said, this is for you. He took it cautiously, eyes widening as he read. This is the proof of the forged applications. The room held its breath. Sloane's shoulders stiffened, ready for impact. But Bryce didn't explode. Instead, he quietly tore the paper in half. Everyone deserves a second chance, he said, but only one. Sloane burst into tears. I raised my glass. Now, who's ready for a housewarming party? The room finally exhaled. People stood, clinked glasses, made small talk. My father stepped out onto the deck. My mother wandered into the kitchen. Noah handed out dessert plates. Jeremy caught me by the shoulder. You planned this, didn't you? He asked. The trust, the scholarship, all of it. Sometimes, I said, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's building something they never imagined you could. The autumn breeze rolled in from the sea as I sat on the deck of the beach house, flipping through the trust's first quarterly reports. The numbers were strong, stronger than I'd hoped. Investments were up. No emergency withdrawals. The counseling fund had already been used by 2 relatives. For once, the Ellis name was attached to something stable, something real. Need help with those? Sloane's voice came from behind me, softer than I'd ever heard it. She was holding 2 mugs of coffee, her nails unpainted, her sweatshirt plain. I nodded and accepted the mug. How was your session? Good, she said, settling into the chair beside me. Hard, but good. The counselor thinks I might be ready to move into a smaller apartment, something I can actually afford. I looked over at her, at the lack of makeup, the lack of armor. That's a big step. It's weird, honestly, she said, letting out a small laugh. Living within my means. Not impulse buying. I unsubscribed from all the luxury newsletters, deleted the shopping apps. She glanced out toward the sea. Turns out I don't need $400 sunglasses to see clearly. The sliding door opened. Our parents stepped onto the deck, followed by Elliot and Noah. Jeremy carried a laptop under one arm. Ready for the first official meeting? He asked. You all settled on the holiday rotation schedule yet? Almost, my mother said, her voice lighter than I'd heard it in years. But your father insists on Thanksgiving week every year. Tradition, my father muttered. That's not tradition, Sloane said. That's turkey-based tyranny. We all laughed, genuinely this time. Elliot sat beside me as Jeremy set up the laptop. Before we start, my father said, clearing his throat, I have something to say. Everyone turned toward him. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. The bank approved our refinancing application, he said, but we're not taking the second mortgage. We decided against it. He looked directly at me. Jordan, you were right. We can't keep enabling destructive patterns. Not for anyone, including ourselves. Sloane nodded quietly, blinking back tears. Thank you, I said, my voice thick. My mother stepped forward with her own folder. All right, she said, shall we discuss Christmas? As they debated schedules and grocery budgets, I noticed Bryce standing a little off to the side, watching Sloane. We're talking, she said quietly, catching my glance. Taking it slow. If we stick to the new budget, if we stay honest, we might be okay. And the shopping, I teased. Gone. Cold turkey. Jeremy called the meeting to order. First item, scholarship expansion proposal. Actually, I interrupted. There's something else first. I pulled out my phone and opened the email I'd received that morning. The resort company sent another offer. You all should hear this. The deck fell silent. My mother shifted in her seat. You're not selling, are you? No, I said. But look at the last paragraph. I read it aloud. In lieu of purchase, Pacific Haven Developments proposes a long-term partnership. The Ellis Trust retains full ownership while the resort develops and manages adjacent properties. The Ellis House will remain private but benefit from increased value and regional investment. Projected appreciation, 3x over 10 years. Bryce let out a low whistle. That's brilliant. You retain control, get the benefits, and set the terms. It's your decision, Sloane said. You earned this. No, I said, looking around the table. It's our decision. That's what the trust is for. My father raised his hand. I vote yes. For the future generations fund. One by one, hands went up. When it came to Sloane, she hesitated, then raised hers too. I used to think success meant having everything I wanted, she said. Now I know it means being worthy of what you have. Jeremy typed briskly. Vote recorded. Amendment will be added to the trust documents. Speaking of records, Elliot said, pulling something from his bag, show them. I unfolded the local newspaper and opened it to the healthcare section. There, printed beneath the headline, Emergency Response Revolutionized at Monterey General, was a photo of me and my trauma team. The article detailed our new triage protocol, a system I developed, one that cut response times by 30%. My little sister, Sloane said softly, but this time there was no sarcasm, no edge, just pride. Not so little anymore, my father added, squeezing my shoulder. No, I said, smiling. Not anymore. Jeremy looked up. Last item on the agenda, mission statement approval. I stood slowly. I have a suggestion. Everyone turned toward me. I cleared my throat. The Ellis Family Trust exists not to create wealth, but to create value. Not to enable, but to empower. Not to divide, but to unite. Through financial responsibility, educational opportunity, and shared experience, we build a legacy of wisdom, resilience, and genuine success. The wind rustled gently across the deck. The sea, ever steady, crashed below us. Sloane wiped her eyes. It's perfect. Then it's official, Jeremy said. The mission statement is approved. We clinked mugs of coffee instead of champagne. More grounded, more real. Through the glass doors, I saw my mother setting out dessert. My father adjusting the cushions. Sloane and Bryce talking quietly in the corner. Elliot turned to me. Think they'll be okay? Maybe, I said. But for the first time, I'm okay. The sun broke through the clouds, casting light across the deck. Warm, solid, true. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't about taking someone down. Sometimes it's rising so high they can't even reach the version of you they tried to destroy.